could talk for hours about all the wonderful things that I'm getting to represent you on. But I'm not going to do that because there's somebody that's going to follow me here in a few seconds. I was asked earlier if I could introduce him, and that's an honor. But I said, I don't think he needs an introduction. You know, you probably haven't heard of him. He's very shy, so I don't want you to scare him. But he's a United States Senator. He doesn't live far from here. And he's the kind of senator that we need in Washington, D.C. I wish we could send about 20 more Jim DeMints to Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, come on up here, Senator. He holds your values. He will uphold the Constitution. It's people like Jim DeMint. I told the Senator earlier, you're in the air war, I'm in the ground war. We'll meet in the middle come November. Senator, thank you for what you do in Washington, D.C. We're behind you 1,000,000%, and let us know what we can do for you. God bless you, brother.
Thank you, Alan. Folks, he is a real hero for us around the country. He is sticking it through the Obama administration, not just with Obamacare, but on getting the fraud out of our voting system, forcing our immigration laws, and getting rid of Dodd-Frank. That's where the real action is going to be in the future, is states stand up and push back against the federal government. And we're going to get more and more of the rights that we're fighting for today. Yes, sir. It's great to be back here with all of you. You know, I've heard that there were a few people here today that are angry with the government. Yeah, I heard a rumor that you were tired of all the spending, the borrowing, the debt, the printing of money, the $16 trillion in debt. I've heard a few of you are here. I even heard a rumor that there are a few people here who are sick and tired of the Obama administration taking over health care, taking over banking, our mortgage system, student loans, General Motors, and many other areas of our economy. I know there are a few people here that feel that way. I heard there are a few people who are angry at the federal government, the Obama administration, for trying to redefine marriage. Are any of you here today? Well, I just want to know one thing from all of you. Who do you think you are? Who are you? Americans. It sounds like that you think you own the place, that this is your country. It sounds like you have a right to complain against politicians who are selling your future. Who do you think you are anyway? It sounds like you think you are we the people and that you have the God-given right to determine your own future as Americans. That's what it sounds like. Well, you come to the right place today. Because what you're doing here is happening all over the country. Do you know I've done a good bit of traveling trying to help elect a new Senate and help put together a new Republican Party that keeps its promises, does what it says once it gets into office. But what you're doing here today creates an energy and an enthusiasm. It encourages, particularly those folks who will be speaking behind me, our House members, who are always told when they're inside of Washington they need to do this and that to support leadership. But folks, they need to remember they work for you, and they do. I can tell you, our congressional delegation knows who they work for. This country does not belong to the government. It does not belong to politicians. It belongs to you, and you have every right to take it back, and I appreciate you helping us do that. I know you're frustrated like I've been, but for way too long, the Washington establishment, the political bosses, picked our candidates and told us who was going to represent us in our primaries, and then once they got to Washington, they just fell in the fold, split up the money, and all took home the bacon, and they sold our country down the drain. Right. For years, all of us felt helpless that we really couldn't change things. Maybe here in South Carolina, where we're a little smarter than the other states, but all over the country, they seem to keep sending people who just spent money, and borrowed money in order to get themselves reelected. But something started to change a few years ago. People decided enough was enough, that they weren't going to take it anymore. A lot of you took to the streets. We all came here once for a big Tea Party rally. And we stopped what had been happening as far as the parties and the establishment running everything in Washington. I was a part of that because I was sick and tired of my own party not keeping their promises in Washington.
Yes, sir.
I went into the Senate with a majority in the Senate, a majority in the House, and George Bush in the White House. And all we did is keep spending money, and we didn't do the things we promised. And we owe Americans more than that. So I decided to do what you're doing. Rock the boat a little bit. Change things.
Thank you.
You know what? My party wanted Arlen Specter to stay in the Senate, but there was a young man named Pat Toomey who I knew would stand for our principles, and I stood with him. And the people of Pennsylvania, the people here in South Carolina, all over the country, got behind him through this Senate Conservatives Fund. Folks, this was just a website that I put up and said I'm only going to support true conservative candidates. And I put Pat Toomey on that website, and the dollars started coming in. The average contribution was $45. But before the end of this, we had raised him nearly $1 million. Down in Florida, our party decided they wanted Governor Charlie Crist as the next senator. We found out how loyal he is to our principles. He's speaking at the Democratic Convention, for heaven's sake. But there was a little-known young man that you may have seen lately named Marco Rubio. Marco understands the promise of America, and he can speak passionately about freedom and what it's meant to his family. But he had no chance of winning. The party wouldn't support him. But the people of Florida did. The people of South Carolina did, and before it was all over, they had raised him more than $1 million, and he won that race overwhelmingly and chased Charlie Crist out of the party. Now, Kentucky was a little, even more rocking the boat, because my own Republican leader was supporting someone else in his own state. But the people were looking at a young man named Rand Paul in Kentucky. I was told Rand Paul couldn't win the primary, and if he did, he couldn't win the general. But the people decided differently, and he won overwhelmingly, and he's a real national leader already. Folks, we saw the same thing in Utah with Mike Lee. In Wisconsin, a Republican conservative couldn't possibly win, and Ron Johnson won, and he's a great new leader. What I'm trying to tell you is this country is in your hands. And we've demonstrated it all over the country. And after the 2010 elections, folks were saying that DeMint, the Tea Party's dead. That was just a flash in the pan. Senator Dick Lugar found out that it was not dead.
That's right.
And we're going to get Richard Murdoch, a strong conservative from Indiana. And in Texas, the establishment picked a lieutenant governor who could self-fund and put millions of his own money in, and no one else really had a chance. Young man, constitutional conservative, Ted Cruz, had 2% in the polls. He had 2% in the polls, but he won the people's hearts. And he won that primary, and he's going to be our next senator. The same's happening in Arizona with Jeff Flake. The folks, we raised over $10 million already to the Senate Conservatives Fund, this time for those candidates. We invested more than $2 million in Texas to help Ted Cruz overcome incredible odds. But these aren't big donors. The average contribution is still $50 or less. People will send me $10 with a little email, and I'll send a little more after my next paycheck. If you're looking for ways that you can help around the country, you can go to senateconservatives.com, and no gift's too small, none's too large, but there are about 10 candidates on there that could make a difference in the Senate. I believe we've got a good chance to win the majority and remove Harry Reid from the majority. But it's not going to be enough just to have a Republican majority. We're going to have a conservative majority, and we're going to keep our promise. The whole point of this is our country is in your hands. And when you leave here today, I know you're all going to vote. Take someone with you to vote. We know South Carolina is going to go Republican, but we want to do it overwhelmingly. Palmetto Patriots are taking people all over the country. Through Senate Conservatives Fund and Palmetto Patriots, you can be part of phone banks, calling for candidates all over the country. You can help change things. And I know that's why you're all here. And so I wouldn't be where I wouldn't still be in office if the Republican establishment had had its way. But now they recognize that I've got millions of people like you who are standing with me.
Yes, sir.
And as a lot of you said, you've got my back. And that has given me an influence in Washington that has allowed me to begin to change things. And that's what it's all about. So thank you for what you've done. And the thing I want to thank you the most for is sending the congressional delegation that you're getting ready to hear from. Have any of you seen our own Trey Gowdy in those hearings? I can tell you, he's in the seat that I was in, but he's the best congressman that I've ever known from our district. And the others, you're going to hear from them, but great champions of freedom. I'm so proud of all of them. They've all taken the time to come tonight because it's important to them to hear from you that what they're doing in Washington is the right thing, because there are people up there telling them to go the other way. So thank you for being the conscience here of all of us in office. Thanks for standing for freedom, for standing with us, and for getting our backs when we make those tough decisions. Thank you, folks.